Welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. I'm going to go over the Pharmacist Workforce free resources for your career and life, basically things that can help you get a job, keep a job, or figure out which job you're interested in getting. I know people don't like the word job, but it's just shorter than career. Just an FYI, Friday, September 27th, 2019, all day, you can get the strong residency letter of intent, writing to be interviewed with a cover letter that earns the invite for free on Amazon.com. Even if you don't have a Kindle or you don't have KDP or anything like that. Okay, well, let's get started. First thing I want to talk about is what I will talk about versus what I won't. So I'll show you a slide about the Pharmacy Workforce Initiative. I think it's a nonprofit that includes a ton of these very big organizations, and the Pharmacist workforce, which is what I'll be talking about. So when you talk about jobs and help with jobs and things like that, the big organizations are good at doing things like a big chain now has lunch breaks of half an hour and moving that forward in larger conversations. But in terms of things that you would like to have as an individual, I think there are people that have their own companies, that have their own websites, that have a ton of free resources for you that can help you with these types of things. So first of all, if you need to pass the NAPLEX, the MPJE, or you're looking to get board certified and you want support, there's just not a ton of stuff out there, especially for BCPS. What about clinical residency support in terms of, is there somebody that I can talk to? I have a really kind of specific question, and some of the people that provide this clinical content either have a document, have a past resource, or can point you to it. But it's not like when you're in residency, besides asking your preceptor, maybe you don't want to look like you don't know what's going on or something like that. You can't ask them. Career documents, you can't call these big organizations and say, hey, can you help me with my resume or CV or letter of intent? And again, I'm happy to help you with your letter of intent this season. $75 if you want to work with me for the whole season, and I'll help you with that. But that's all I do. I don't work with resumes. I don't do. I'll help you if you have questions about the interview and things like that. But there are people I will point you to in terms of if you're looking for a job and help with that particular interview. So career advice, interview help, non-traditional paths. That's another thing that I think this kind of group that I'll be introducing you to does a really great job of. Family support. Hey, I'm a mom. I'm really struggling. I'd like to connect with other moms. And so Suzy Solomon's Pharmacist Moms group is huge, 30,000. We've got a dad's group. There's 200 of us. So it's still growing. It's in its infancy. Entrepreneurial clinical training. So if you want to become your own entrepreneur and you want to start providing clinical services in some way or another, Blair, Tila, Meyer, for example, I'll talk about, is phenomenal for that. Maybe you just want to improve your mental and physical fitness, but you'd like a pharmacist, someone that really understands what you're going through in your life at the same time. There's a couple of people there. And then it's not like you can call your college and say, hey, I appreciate the degree, I get there's a financial aid office, but I'd like to pay off my student loans. And they're like, well, we can certainly help you maybe with that, but I'd like to pay off my student loans. At the same time, I want to think about how my family and my house and my investments are all going to work, and that's something that you can't call back to the school for. So what I want to create with this video is introduce you to a ton of free resources in these 8 categories where maybe you can't call the big organizations or even your state organizations for these one-on-one type of support, and these are people that do it at a very high level. And I do want to show you, this is the Pharmacy Workforce Center. This is the group that kind of puts together every 5 years. I think they have a report about how things are going or something like that. But you want help right now. And happy World Pharmacist Day. That's cool. All right, so let's look at these websites. I've put them all together. One of my favorites, because I teach pharmacology, is reallifepharmacology.com. It's a podcast. Usually the podcasts are like 7 to 14 minutes. And goes Eric Christensen owner of MedEd101.com, goes over the pharmacology of something. And as a pharmacology instructor who doesn't have a clinical practice, this is how I have to learn it. And it's certainly a lot more entertaining to listen to him than it is to read the 1.2 million words of the textbook and see what they've changed. So certainly this is one great way to do it. And then he also has a blog, MedEd 101. So if you're interested in reading about things like that, you've got Diabetes Care, which was the most recent one on September 25th. Something that he also has is Pharmacotherapy, which is one of the books I'll talk about in a minute, but we worked together to make sure that it was an audiobook and available. So if you're going back and forth to residency or school or whatever, you can listen to that. We got 2 books, about 14 hours of content. TLDR Pharmacy is in the same space where you have this great clinical knowledge that comes out every couple of weeks. It's free to listen, and then he's got a website or an email list that you can also join. You get 3 freebies: antibiotic cheat sheet, residency job interview evaluation form, and chapter 1 of the book, Pharmacy School Missing Manual, if you get on his email list, but a ton of great clinical content here as well. And then while Mike Corvino does have a website, I listen to his podcasts, and he's got 170 almost 5-star ratings. And this is great because instead of listening to or trying to read through very dense clinical literature, you just get an entertaining conversation that is filled with, just drops clinical bombs that are here and there. You're like, oh, that's really cool. Didn't really understand that. The most recent one was Fluids, Not Just for Drinking, with Dr. Brian Gilbert, who talks a lot about fluid management and critical care. And what I've had people do is look at their RX prep book, if they're studying for the NAPLEX that way, and just start setting it up so that they can listen to these episodes and cross off each of those chapters, because a lot of times that book looks a lot like a doorstop for the first couple of months, and this is just one great way to get that content. I help people at a much different level. I teach freshman and sophomore pharmacology. Maybe P1s would be interested in this. I do have an online pharmacology class I teach here, but I've also got mobile pharmacology quizzes and a ton of videos on pharmacology. If you go to Pharm.D, I'm Toni Gera, there's 1,500 videos, 6 million views, and a ton of content there. And then I'm kind of famous for writing a book like every week. Not really that bad, but I've got a ton of free audiobook codes. So whether it's pharmacology in the top 200, pharmacotherapy, career, residency, entrepreneurship, or college interviews and admissions, you can get free audiobook codes. I'm just kind of an audiobook nut because, one, as a student, I have trouble hearing, so it helps me to be able to hear it over and over again. But also, I've got triplet 8-year-old girls, so I just don't have a lot of time to read, so I prefer audio over ebooks and print books. When you're talking about going for a job interview, this is the person to call, RX Ashley. And this is her blog. She's got a ton of help, and just, it's kind of like she's like, how did she know I was struggling with this? Because all of it is so timely. But also, if you work with her, she is amazingly positive. You just start talking to her and you feel better about your circumstance. And a lot of people think, oh, well, getting a new job or finding a new job is about a great resume or a great CV or just meeting the right person. But a lot of it is your emotional state and how positive you are. And Ashley is a proton. She is positive all the time. ResidencyHelp.com, I separated this from memorizing Pharm, just so I've got a number of things that can help you if you're looking to become a resident. I've got letter of intent help, recommendation help, and then the Pharmacy Residency podcast. Now, I've already opened the windows. Residency letter of intent. So again, if you want to work with me one-on-one, that's great. Otherwise, I've got a free template for you in Word and PDF form here that can help you. And you'll notice that I didn't fill it out all the way. That's because, and I'm not kidding, over 50% of students use the UCSF or the Duke template, and I kid you not, their residency letters of intent look identical. So here you are, you've gone through 6 years of school, 5 years of school, whatever it is, and you end your road unintentionally because you thought what they were doing was giving you a template. Residency letters of intent should be original. So my template is meant to say, hey, this is what you should put in there, but it should be original and it should be very clear that these are your own words that you're using. Also, recommendations is something that people don't usually think that they have a lot of control over, but I tied it into a lot of the questions we had in 100 Strong Residency Interview, questions, answers, and rationales. But when you are asking for a recommendation, the first thing, especially as a recommender, I'm looking at is how hard are you making it for me to write these recommendations? It's super competitive this year. 7,000 last year, 50% if you're looking at who enrolled in the residency, 64% if you look at who got into the actual match. And the difference is, if you got one interview, then your chances of getting residency go up immediately by 13% from 51 to 64. In terms of numbers, you're dead in the water if you don't have an interview. But what I'm trying to get at is if you send someone a request and say, hey, I've got 12 or 15 residencies that I want you to write recommendations for, and you don't explain to them how easy you're going to make it, then you'll probably get rejected. And if you do the opposite, which is, hey, these are all the things that we did on the site that you could put in the recommendation if you wanted, and here's the content that would be relevant for each individual site and why I'm thinking about it, then somebody's thinking about, all right, maybe I'll have a half hour to do this, rather than thinking, all right, well, let me block off a week to do this recommendation. You have a ton of control over the recommenders and what they can, the level to which they can write. And I just wanted to make that clear. And it's here's a free template. Here's what you should be emailing to them. And there's a video that kind of explains how to do it as well. Pharmacy Residency Podcast. Just talked to Mary Walton from the University of Louisiana Monroe. She earned 8 residency interviews, and I asked her, hey, are you willing to come on and just kind of tell us how you did it? And she was so authentic on the podcast, you could tell why someone would want her to be a resident. But what you don't know necessarily is, how do I convey that in the materials that I have? CV, application, recommendations, and letter of intent. And she was able to do that because, and the way that she said it was, she was able to get her personality in there, and then 8 people invited her, and then so she had a lot of comparing, that when she went to those 8 interviews and she went to one, it's like, wow, I really feel at home here. And basically they were saying, hey, we'd really love you to make your home here. And it just kind of really worked. And so it's really hard if you only have 1 or 2 interviews to get that feeling. But when you have 8, what a wonderful opportunity that is to see, okay, well, this is what fits, this is what matches, this might not. Talk to Your Pharmacist podcast. Although she has her own website, I prefer to go to, I used my podcast app. And some of these, most of us are working, actually I think all of us are working full time, and we don't have the luxury of, okay, let me update my website today and update the podcast and all that stuff. So usually the most up to date is going to be on Apple Podcasts or on some kind of mobile device that you use. And this is the connector. It's no accident that FedEx puts everything into Tennessee. Hillary Blackburn is the same way, where she really connects a ton of people in pharmacy. And it's like that, was it Kevin Bacon, like 3 or 4 degrees? Like, you can do the same thing with Hillary Blackburn. She's going to know those people. And she is such a connector and just a phenomenal person who, man, she just really has everyone's back and really trying to uplift, and especially entrepreneurial women, especially at the highest level. So Definitely recommend the Talk to Your Pharmacist podcast. And it was kind of cool that she connected with RX Radio recently. They were celebrating kind of their podcasting anniversaries. Can't say enough about Suzy Solomon, who put together the Pharmacist Moms group and those 30,000 people that now have support where they didn't. I can't believe that support wasn't there. But she has a blog that you can check out, and the Facebook group is obviously the kind of huge way that she helps a lot of people. Pharmapreneur Academy and BT Pharmacy Consulting. So this is Blair, Tila, Meyer, who gives great advice on some of the things that we are absolutely petrified. I'm an extrovert, so I don't really deal with this, but introverts, how do I feel? How do I do business and talk to people if I don't want to be pushy or I don't want to be salesy and those types of things? And she has a ton of free resources on her blog, but we were able to do a book together. And I just published the audio version of it. She'd already done it. And she just has such a great story. Lost my job, not only got a new job, but started helping others, and now helping literally hundreds to thousands of people improve their pharmacy lives. The Pharmacist Guide. This one is one that was new to me. I just recently started reading, and because I rarely read, it has to be spot on right away. But one of the big things is figuring out how do I get something that that fits me, but that I can kind of transition to. And her Blazing Your Trail in Pharmacy that she wrote back in August 30th was just a really great blog post. Okay. Birth Control Pharmacist. This is actually a group of pharmacists. The one that I'll show you who the partners are. Not partners, but contact, I want to say. Nope. Here they are. Okay, so Sally Raffy's the one that I know, but there are a number of other people involved in this. But they have really a ton of courses in terms of contraceptive training and things like that. And one of the really big opportunities for pharmacists coming down the pipe is being able to be that person that's helping, because some people just don't have that physician care. Some people don't have work supporting them and those types of things. Fit Pharmacist. I've known Adam Martin for a long time. Well, long time in the digital world, right? And he has a great podcast that I just most recently listened to, and I think there's actually a newer episode than this one that was about stress. And maybe my app just pulled it up because they're like, your wife's leaving for 3 days. You're probably going to need this episode. But the episode on stress was really great in terms of talking about those kinds of things that you can do to make things a little bit better. But physical and mental health, the Fit Pharmacist is phenomenal, and I know he does public speaking as well. Dr. Jessica Louie, so the Burnout Doctor podcast, and really burnout and mental health is what she's talking about. She has her own podcast as well, and this is the kind of thing that really I think sometimes you don't realize you're burnt out until it just completely collapses. And in many ways, a lot of the things that she recommends can help prevent you from burning out as well. Okay. And then the Your Financial Pharmacist podcast, it's kind of the place to go if you have issues if you're a pharmacist, have issues about money and things like that. It just is, it's just exploded into this amazing resource. And I love the podcast. I don't know if I'm Republican by political affiliation, but what would you do with an extra $1,000 per month is that I think it's Andrew Yang, I think that's his first name, is one of the Democratic hopefuls. I think he's number 4 right now at 8%. Then there's Biden and 2 others, Sanders and one other, I can't remember her name, that are going for it. But basically his idea is everyone should get $1,000 a month as a basic income, and they kind of use this as a neat way to say, all right, well, what would you do with an extra $1,000 a month, and what should you do? Can you make good financial decisions and all of that? But if you've got student loans, investing, those types of questions, these are the guys to go to. And then kind of one of the godfathers of them all is the Pharmacy Podcast Network. And because there's so many people in there, it's kind of tough to just narrow down one. But you'll see Suzy Solomon on there, and RX Ashley, who I both mentioned before. But the Pharmacy Podcast Network has a ton of content on opportunities in workforce. So I've gone about 20 minutes, but what I want to do is make sure that you know that there are people out there, and a ton of this stuff are in the Unicorn Jobs book I wrote, but basically that there are people out there that you can talk to, email, go on Insta, go message them and ask. I've gotten a lot of questions recently. Hey, things maybe didn't go the best for me after I graduated. What would you do if you were in my situation? And I can, they might get a response from me in like 5-10 minutes. Hey, I'm looking for residency. What are the things that I need to do? So we're very responsive, and we're individuals who are working and trying to help you, as opposed to being, these much larger groups that are doing great things like getting lunch breaks, getting provider status like Washington State, Ohio, and those types of things. But you can't call them and say, hey, I need help with my resume, or hey, I've got this clinical question. These people are some of the people that you can call and talk to. So happy World Pharmacist Day. As usual, if you want to talk to me, Toni Pharm.D1, and if you're interested in with getting help with your letter of intent, just email me. I'll look at it after work at aaguerra@dmacc.edu, and I will talk to you guys soon.